We can capture, right?
Yes, no flash.
Oh,
No light.
yeah.
These are Irish fallow deer. They're
Oh.
10,000 years old. Run thing when Henry VIII obviously had such good power. And when I say running things, it meant also closing down some of the religious institutions that Henry VIII did. He had to take the wealth and spread it amongst themselves. So you could say that some of his wealth wasn't exactly based on honest principles, and throughout the centuries it's varied from time to time. But that's sufficient money that at the time there was a priory, and John Flynn was so rich he could actually buy a quarry near the city of Bath and had a lot of stone shipped down to build Longleat House. John Flynn could travel through time and stood outside the front of the house. He would recognise the house as the one he built. He'd recognise this room, it hasn't changed a lot. He'd recognise the fireplace, it's still the original fireplace. The clock on the left, the wind indicator on the right, the clock doesn't work anymore unfortunately, but the wind indicator on the right still works, it goes all the way up to the roof of the house. And so if the wind changes direction, it's reflected there. You'd also recognise the structure of this room. You'd recognise the giant hammer wood beams which hold up the roof. And you'd recognise the structure here above the entrance, although in those days it didn't have all the wood carvings on it, which has got the minstrel's gallery above it, where the musicians would play. Now, when John Flynn originally built the house, it was the shape of a letter C, but if you square off all the edges. And the front of the house would be the back of the letter C. Okay, these days it's a slightly different shape. Other things to observe in here, we've got the balcony out there, which was allegedly installed for the visit of King Charles II. I say allegedly because he actually stayed for one night. So the question was, did they really do all that work for one visit? I suspect they may have done a opening of some sort, and then a lot of the ornate woodwork may have been added much later. But the reason that was done was so Charles II could be up in the state drawing room, which we'll get to see later. He could listen to the musicians in the minstrel's gallery, but the people, the smelly people, hadn't had their annual bath, had the fleas, the plague, you name it. We were all down here, so they didn't have to mix with us. That's how it goes. The antlers, you see these giant ones, these are actually prehistoric antlers. These were found in some Irish peat bogs in Ireland when the family owned land there, and they had them shipped back to hang up in here. That's over 10,000 years old, they reckon, those antlers. Okay. Right, follow me then, please. Buildings here, perhaps for cooking or keeping chickens or pigs or something. But the house is literally shaped a little bit on the left side, across the back, and down there. And the staircase upstairs was in the corner over there in that place. Now, forward in time, about the 1800s, major changes to the house took place. Marquess at the time changed the layout to reflect a style where the family were basically separate from the servants. So they added the grand staircase through the middle, they added the back of the house and joined the sides. So the house now is shaped like a number 8, square off all the edges. Okay, grand staircase is the middle of the 8, there's one of the holes in the 8 and the other one is the other side of the grand staircase. So when this was done in the 1800s, it started to differentiate, so the servants were separate from the family lifestyle. So the family could come down the grand staircase and walk to one of the other rooms, whereas the servants will often have to use servants' corridors, and we'll be seeing some of the servants' corridors a little bit later on. We've had a lot of royal visitors over the years. Elizabeth first came in the old version of the house, I believe. We've had King George II, King George III, Charles I, Charles II. The current Queen has been there, Queen Elizabeth II. She came in 1980 for the 400th anniversary of the house. It was an unofficial visit, so it wasn't lots of photographers and that, but she did come for lunch, and she actually signed the guest book while we were here. I'll mention that a bit later. Now the coach here, technically it's called a chariot because the passengers face the same direction, you see. But I call it a coach, everyone knows what I'm talking about. And this wasn't used by the family, it's dated from about 1800s, 1820s I believe, and it was in use as a coach, and then put into storage. And if you wonder how we get it in here, we take the wheels off and then it fits with the door, and then we put the wheels back on again, okay? But this was used by the 6th Marquess back in 1953 to attend our current Queen's coronation. So he was invited to the coronation, being a Marquess, and he said, wonderful, I'll bring my coach. And I said, you can't bring your coach. We don't have any horses, we've got no means of parking, etc, etc. But the Marquess often doesn't listen to what other people tell him to do, so he said he's bringing it anyhow. Advertised some horses, local brewery in London, because in those days they still delivered the beer to the pubs by horses, provided their horses and the coachman, and he got 2 schoolboys to be footmen, and he actually attended the coronation in the coach. And I'll mention that again a little bit later on. Okay? Right. Do you want to follow me, please? This is the ante-library. There's 7 libraries in Longleat House. There are over 44,000 books in the collection here. When John Finn originally built the house, he had about 80 books, which in 1580 was extremely rare. And of those 80 odd books, just over 40 is still in the collection now. We have first editions of Alice in Wonderland. We've got Shakespeare folios. We've got books where they're the only known copy in existence. Has every book been read? I doubt it. Far too many. But they used to buy books just to fill up the library. So if they had a new library, they would buy books. And often the books would be rebound with nice leather, so they will look the same as well. I'd like to think every book has been read, but I'll be very surprised. So we have the green library on my left there, which is still used for business meetings to do with running of the park. The anti-library here, the red library there, we're going through. So, when all those extra corridors were added in 1800s, that enabled the family lifestyle to be different from the servants. Previously, the servants would be sat in the corner of a room and the family would be there around by sides. Come the 1870s, the 4th Marquess fell in love with everything Italian. Spent a lot of time in Italy, came back from Italy, started to change the decoration of the house. Most of what you see in a lot of the rooms now. And at the time he got an interior designer called Grace, and he was the interior designer of the day, and gave him instructions to start adding all this extra plasterwork to the ceilings and buying or producing paintings to add to the ceilings and all other decoration around the house. So what you're seeing here is some of the work in the 1870s. Some of the paintings they already owned, others they probably purchased, and they were then cut out to put upon the ceiling. I'll mention another one a bit later on, I'll point it out. The wallpaper in here was done in the 1870s, and it's actually hand painted. So whilst it had the 3D effect on it, which they could produce, they couldn't do the colours, so it was actually hand painted whilst it was installed. I suspect it has been painted more than once once it's been up there. If you look at this piece of furniture here, it's Italian, and you think, why are the chairs so low? If you're reading a book or doing some sewing, and you put a candle on the table, it was at the right height for when you sat down. Behind me is a portrait of Henry. Just a bit. And that kicked off the stately home tourist business. As time went on, there's more competition. Jimmy Chipperfield Circus approached him with an idea for the first safari park outside of Africa. Henry said, I don't want to put lions in a cage. And Jimmy Chipperfield said, no, the people will be in the cages. They'll be driving in the cages. The animals will be in the fields. And hence, the Lions of Longleat appeared in 1966. Interesting aside, when he did the planning application, he didn't mention lions, he just mentioned livestock. That's how he got the permissions through. Okay, follow me. this is the red library. Again, you've got hand-painted wallpaper. Some of this wallpaper, you'll see bits of black paint as well. And that was to try and give it the impression as if it was leather, because there was a fashion for leather on walls at the time, but it is hand-painted wallpaper. Once again, this is done in the 1870s. Got the ornate plasterwork on the ceiling. And this was all put up in sections, and it actually all hangs on a wooden frame up in the ceiling cavity up there. What's particularly nice up here, if you see the black and white three-dimensional pictures, they're actually painted in 2 dimensions, but they look as if they're 3 dimensions. It's actually painted on black linen. They're really quite good. As you've noticed, there are lots of pictures of people. There's over 700 paintings in this house. Lots and lots of portraits. I do not know who all these people are. I think I'd be a bit sad if I did. But quite a few of them were members of the family, and some of them were relations of the family. Others were quite important people at the time, so it was a good idea to have their portrait hanging up for political reasons. And when you've got over 120 rooms in a house, you just buy lots of paintings to fill them up. So I suspect there's quite a few of those as well. Now, assuming you all pay your taxes, yes we do, of course we do, yeah. You actually own part of this desk, believe it or not. So when Henry had his inheritance bill, you could actually donate items of furniture to the country to offset your tax bill. And this is one of those items, a bull desk from about 1700s, extremely rare, extremely valuable, extremely delicate, to the extent that if we wish to move this desk, the Victorian Albert Museum have to be involved in doing it. So this was donated to the country to offset some of his tax bill. So if you're a UK taxpayer, you actually own a little bit of this desk. Only a little bit, but you do own a bit, and you can't take it home with you. This is known as the chattel. There's other chattels in the house as well, and that's also part of the reason the house is open to the public, because these items have to be on display to the public as they're owned by the public. You can do a tour of purely the chattels in the house, and the cheeky bit is they actually charge you to go and see items which you partly own. This way, please. Move items of furniture around and put them on display. So some of the rooms you go into have got lots of furniture in them, probably more than they would have had when it was used as just a house to live in. And this room, which we call the breakfast room, actually wasn't a breakfast room, it was actually a billiard room in here. You have a billiard table for playing billiards, and there's still a billiard table in the house. It's over on the western side in the private apartments. I say private apartments because this is still a home. This is still lived in by the Finn family, which is their family name, T-H-Y-N-N-E. And Swarling and Emma and their 2 boys still live in the house to this day. And they do wander through sometimes, and they do use the great hall for parties, and they sometimes use the lower dining room. And sometimes the boys just charge through being boys. It's their home, why not? Fantastic. And as I say, Henry often changed some of the rooms, and he changes as a breakfast room, as he calls it. But the idea was, on the 1st of April 1949, Henry was having breakfast. He finished breakfast, put down his copy of the Times newspaper, put down his napkin, pushed the chair back, went to the front door, opened the door, went, "Hello, welcome to Longleat." Remember I mentioned paintings on the ceilings?